Welcome to the EXO Training System. You will learn from industry professionals and top field leaders the most effective techniques and time-tested principles to build your business. Now, here is your EXO speaker to share their insights.
How many of you guys have been using the Calm and Clear? I just want to kind of get an idea. Okay, that's great. How about the Omega? The Omega Max, we got a lot of people, and the multivitamin? Okay, good. It's amazing the testimonials that I've been hearing from people on the magnesium especially. I think probably a lot of you are chronically sleep deprived maybe. How many of you have noticed that it's been helping with sleep? Quite a few? Okay. So one of the things that Jann asked me to come here today was to talk about a little bit more about the process behind these products and why I use them. You know, to give you a little bit of background about me, I'm a medical doctor, so allopathic medicine. You go through 4 years of medical school after postgraduate, and then you do 3 years of residency, and then you're unleashed on your patients. And the first probably 10 years of my practice, I followed the traditional model of you have a problem, I have a pill. You have another problem, I've got another pill for that. And so that was the pill for the problem approach. And I got tired of it because I didn't really see that people were getting better. And in some cases, I actually hurt people, right? Because medications have a lot of side effects. You guys have been watching TV and that ad comes on and it says, talk to your doctor about if you have these symptoms or whatnot. And it's always in the nicest, most pleasant voice possible. This drug may cause, and then they just go on and talk about how you'll have rectal prolapse and you're going to pass out and your heart may stop. But all the while you're watching these people like, you know, galloping through a field or doing something really pleasant. You're thinking, well, that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, how bad could rectal prolapse be? So I really kind of challenged myself in my practice to say, what am I really doing? Am I really helping people get down to the root cause of the problem? At our clinic, that's what we really try to do. And so what it meant is that I needed to be able to move away from the pharmaceutical world, and I needed to be able to understand more about nutrition, and I needed to understand more about micronutrients. And unfortunately, in medical school, they didn't teach us any of that. And I always joke that what I learned about nutrition in medical school, I could probably write on the back of a matchbook with a crayon. A very short lecture. So the products that we're using, one of the things, when I started to do this, people would come to me and I'd say, hey, you know, for instance, hypertension or high blood pressure, I would say, you know, I want you to exercise, I want you to eat right, and I want you to go get some magnesium. And, you know, this is very early on in my functional and integrative career. They would go out and they would get some magnesium, they'd come back to me and they'd go, it's not working, my blood pressure's not any different, and I'm having diarrhea. And so then I'd have to think about, okay, what's wrong with that picture? Well, where'd you get the magnesium? Oh, I went to GNC, and I told the guy I needed magnesium, and he gave me the most expensive bottle of magnesium they had. So, okay, well, let me look at the bottle. And I looked at the label, and it says magnesium oxide. And I remembered back from a lecture, oh, magnesium oxide, that's 4% bioavailable, okay? 4% of the 400 milligram, which is a typical magnesium oxide dose. So you're getting 16 milligrams of magnesium per that expensive capsule. And really, most of it's probably causing diarrhea. So what I learned is that out in the grocery stores and GNC and Target and a lot of those places, that's not where we're getting the high quality micronutrients. And the FDA doesn't regulate the supplement industry. And I think that's probably both a blessing and a curse, right? Because it's a blessing in the sense that when the FDA does get involved in something, it becomes very expensive, but they very tightly control what goes into it. So the FDA, for any U.S. pharmaceutical product, like let's say for thyroid, for instance, you have to have a certificate of analysis for that particular drug, and that's called U.S. Pharmacopoeia guidelines. So it has to verify that it doesn't have any heavy metals, it can't have any microcontaminants, so it can't be growing E. coli in there. It has to actually, if the label says it has 97 milligrams of something, it has to be within 10% on either side. So it could be 90% of that, it could be 110%. So that's label claim, and that's a requirement of the USP. For the supplement industry, they don't have to do any of that, right? They all have the label at the bottom that says these claims have not been verified by the FDA. That's the hard part. So when you go out into the market and you buy something off the shelf, in most cases, in my experience, it's junk. In New York, the Attorney General went and they pulled product off of the shelves at Target. So what's Target's brand called? Is that Up and Up? Yeah, so it was the Up and Up brand, and then there was the Walgreens brand, GNC, and there was one other store they went into. But they pulled something like 85 different products. Most of them were herbals or had herbs in them. And then they sent them to an FDA reference laboratory. So an FDA reference laboratory is one where if a drug has a problem, they send it there and they have them analyze it to make sure that it has what it's supposed to have in it. And what they found out was just shocking. Most of those things didn't have anything in them that was on the label. In fact, the most commonly identified herb was a variant of a house plant. Now, that's probably why when I first started doing this and I was sending people out to get these things from grocery stores, that it wasn't working. But you guys are sitting in this room and you know that the things we're using today that we've developed for PhyzixMD, they work. So why is that? Well, number one, I think that's clap on that one. That's absolutely. For us to use anything in our clinic, it has to follow the same guidelines that a USP product would. You can cut a wide swath in manufacturers by doing that. If a manufacturer comes to my office and says, hey, we want you to consider this product, I'll say, great. I need a certificate of analysis. I need to see the dissolution time. I need to see the micro, the heavy metal. I want to see the label claims. And if they say, well, we don't do that testing, then I say, then I'm not going to use your product. Because if I'm going to use it in patients in a clinical way, I have to know that it has what it says it has in there and nothing else. So where we're doing the manufacturing for PhyzixMD, we have all of that. I had a tour of this facility about 3 years ago when we were looking for a manufacturer. They do make a few drugs that they make for the FDA here. So they have the highest certification that you can have. And one thing that's unique about this facility is they designed it from the ground up, thinking about all the way down to the capsule level. So at most manufacturers, when they have to move powders around, and these are large tumblers that mix the product, when they have to move that powder through machines and encapsulate it, the powder gets stuck to the walls of these things, and to get it to flow, you have to use a flowing agent called magnesium stearate. Now, magnesium stearate's not the kind of magnesium your body uses. In fact, magnesium stearate can actually bind micronutrients and form a film around them, but it makes things slide really easily. So this particular manufacturer said, we want to use the very least amount of magnesium stearate we can because we know that it's going to affect the efficacy of the product in the end. So when they built this facility, they said, we want to take advantage, and rather than moving powder laterally along vacuum lines, they actually built their facility 3 stories high. So there's a room where these hoppers are guided over little holes in the floor, and the powder actually falls from 2 stories up, so that when they're packing it into those little capsules, they can do it in a way that really uses gravity for the most part and very little magnesium stearate. Very, very high quality manufacturing process. In fact, when we toured this facility, the guy at the very end, they show those bottles going through a little machine right before they get the label put them on. There's this one part where it moves through a little box about this big. The guy, he took his ring off and he pushed his arm. I thought he was going to do a magic trick. You know how they always say, I don't have anything up my sleeves. He took his arm and he put his arm inside the machine, and this red light goes off and the whole line shuts down. And he said, this is a metal detector that's so sensitive, it's picking up the iron in my blood. The very last step before they put a label on that is it has to make sure that even a metal contaminant is part of the manufacturing process. They want to make sure that it didn't get inside the bottle. I mean, it's an incredibly sensitive process. So this particular manufacturer really stands behind everything. So for all the products that we're using, we can get that certificate of analysis. So there's a lot number. I can go back for that lot number. Yeah. And that's really important. And Jann was talking to a physician, was it last week, who this physician said, I don't believe in vitamins. I don't believe they work. And I would say for most vitamins, he's probably right, because most vitamins are coming from manufacturers who don't use this kind of process. They're not going back and they're not spending the extra money to do the testing. So when we get the raw materials, the ingredients that are in that multivitamin, for instance, every single raw material, when it comes in, it goes into a quarantine cage, And so this is an area that's separated off from the rest of their facility. And then once they have that raw material in a large drum, they take a little bit out and they send it out for micro, and they send it out for testing. They do all the various testing on them. And I get these, when we have a product, for instance, our Just For Her product that we'll be launching in September, I know everybody's really excited about that one. About every week I get an email and it says, this particular ingredient and it shows me what all the levels are. So I'm right down to the very granular level on this. We're seeing every single ingredient going in there. And sometimes when we have if we have a delay in manufacturing, it's because that particular product, that particular piece of raw material didn't meet the standard. And so they have to go back and they have to resource it. So it does mean that we sometimes don't get these things as fast as we want. And that's probably one of the reasons that the Just For Her takes a little bit longer. But it's something that I can stand behind. And that's very important to me. So the three, I kind of want to touch briefly on the products we have. So you guys are very familiar with the magnesium product. And there's 2 magnesiums. So a lot of questions I get are, which magnesium should I take? It really depends on your preference. So if I'm going to be traveling, I'll take the magnesium that's in the capsule. That's a very bioavailable magnesium. That one's great for muscle aches. It's good for people who have high blood pressure. If you have problems with constipation, it'll help with motility. It dissolves very quickly. It's in a very highly bioavailable form. So that's a great chelated magnesium. Calm and Clear is really a special magnesium. It's a magnesium salt. And so magnesium, you guys know, is a metal. And we don't absorb metals. We have to put them in a salt form. And so like I said, that magnesium oxide is not very bioavailable. There's magnesium citrate, there's malate, there's glycinate. But threonate is the particular magnesium that we have in Calm and Clear. And the unique thing about magnesium threonate is that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. Now, the blood-brain barrier, have any of you guys heard that term before, blood-brain barrier? Okay, a few people have. So we have a few barriers in our body. A first barrier, or our first line of defense, is our skin, right? And there's things that don't get across our skin. We have another barrier that's in our gut. So our gut will keep bad things out and try to bring good things in. So products that we make have to be able to get through either the skin if they're topical, or if they get through the gut if we take them orally. Well, the tightest barrier we have in our body, and for good reason, is the barrier in our brain. So all of the blood vessels in the brain are lined by a really tight endothelial lining, and it's very, very selective about which things are allowed to come in and out. You don't want bad things in your brain, but things like mercury, unfortunately, can go through the brain pretty easily. We want to make sure that our products don't have any heavy metals in them at all. So magnesium threonate was designed by a group in MIT, some scientists who were trying to increase brain levels of magnesium. They had a theory that part of the problems we have with cognition when we age, so Alzheimer's disease and dementia, is that we're not giving adequate amounts of magnesium across that blood-brain barrier. And I think the thing that excited me so much about the magnesium threonate was the animal studies where they harvested the brains of mice, might have been rats that were fed a diet that had this magnesium threonate in it, the exact same magnesium that's in Calm and Clear. And they had fed these rats for 3 months, and then they sacrificed the rats, and they took thin slices of the brain, and they looked at them under an electron scanning microscope with a special fluorescent stain. And it was amazing. You could just look at, and I don't look at these scans on a daily basis, but I could see the picture and the density, just the amount of fluorescein stain that was coming off the rat brain that had been on the magnesium was about twice what it was in the other one. So we're seeing a lot of neuron density increasing with the magnesium threonate. And Alzheimer's is something that I'm really interested in. In fact, we've got 2 Alzheimer's trials that are starting next month, third one that'll start probably the second half of the year, and then a 4th one after that. And unfortunately, I'm not able to get any of these people on the magnesium threonate. Those trials they're in process right now, and they're not enrolling any new sites. So I don't have access to that data, but I have talked to some of the researchers who've been doing it, and they've been very impressed with how it's helped people with cognition and sleep and things like that. That's the 2 different magnesium powders, and how they differ is really basically how you want to use them. I like to use the magnesium, the Calm and Clear at night, and then when I'm traveling or if I do a hard workout, I'll take the magnesium capsule. You'll know if you've taken has anybody taken too much magnesium yet? Yeah, there's a few people in the back like, I've definitely took too much magnesium. And you probably thought, well, if a little bit's good, then a whole lot of it's going to be even better, right? Well, you can't overdose on magnesium. You can get too much, and what happens is your body will kick it out. And in an unpleasant way, you will be running to and from the bathroom several times during the day. You really don't have to worry about getting too much magnesium, but if that happens, if you're taking magnesium and you notice that your stools are getting a little loose, just back off a little bit. It's very easy to actually titrate it that way. So the multivitamin. Did any of you guys see the YouTube video that I put out? The one is that I found it out by my barn. Some people saw that. Okay. In that YouTube video, one of the things that I talk about, and I get this question a lot, right? People will come and they'll bring grocery bags of vitamins that they're on, and a lot of people like taking whole food supplements. Have you guys ever seen the whole food supplements, like the Juice Plus and some of those other products? And they sound like a great idea, right? You're taking real food, you're dehydrating it, you're pulverizing it, you're getting it down so that you can get these whole foods into a capsule form and take them. The problem that I've had with that is that if we really could get all the nutrients we needed, we would just go and get them from food. But as I presented in that YouTube video, the studies show that the food that we're creating nowadays is not being created with nutritional content in mind. You've seen things like, the GMO process that a lot of food has undergone, and really not even just GMO, a lot of it's just we've hybridized food to be more disease resistant, drought resistant. We're making apples that look brighter, they're juicier, they're redder, but no one's really giving any concern to the nutritional content. So these group of researchers said, well, let's go back and look at the historical data from the USDA back in 1950, I think it was. Back in 1950, they couldn't measure for everything that we can measure now. It was phosphorus and nitrogen, vitamin C. There were a few other things that they were measuring for. And then they compared it to the data that we have now. So in less than half a century, what they said is that there have been reliable declines in almost every one of those micronutrients, and some of them up to 69% decline. So I kind of wonder, well, where are we going to be in 100 years? What's our food going to look like? And I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of these micronutrient deficiencies in our practice. But if you take all that food that's already micronutrient deficient, you powder it and pulverize it and dehydrate it and put it in a capsule, I don't think you're going to get the same levels as you're going to get from something like we're using with PhyzixMD, where we are taking the most bioavailable form of that micronutrient and putting it in a capsule. So, supplements, the big word there is it's just to supplement, right? I don't want people to think that these products are going to replace having a good lifestyle. That would be the pill for the problem approach. I don't eat very well, so I'm going to take a multivitamin. That's not going to work. You need to start with a good, healthy diet. We're going to be talking a lot about lifestyle and diet in January. Very, 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 very excited about that. That's really, I think, where the heart of this stuff comes from, is getting people to eat right. The supplements are there to just do that, to supplement a healthy lifestyle. So the Omega product, everybody's tried the Omega product, Omega Max? Yeah, that one's really, really exciting. You guys have heard that fish oil is good for you, right? How many have taken fish oil and it made you burp, right? Fish oil, the fish oil industry is huge. I remember even as a kid, my parents were trying to get me to take fish oil, right? Because they'd heard that this was going to help with heart disease. And so that industry has a lot of corruption in it. Same with the olive oil industry. Do you guys like olive oil? We use a lot of olive oil in our family. The New York Times did a great piece on the olive oil corruption. Most olive oil that you buy here that says it's made in Italy, it'll say bottled in Italy, but not product of Italy. And if you look closely at the label, that oil comes from lots of different countries. The Italian governments, they're trying to kind of crack down on it. We think of Italy being a large producer of olive oil. They're actually the world's #1 importer of olive oil. That's kind of interesting. Why are they importing it? Well, they can't grow enough to meet demand, probably. But they don't have the strict quality control measures. There's a lot of Malaysian soybean oil that's coming in. It's actually being cut with the olive oil, and most of the poor quality oil they're sending to the United States. Why are they doing that? Because we don't actually know what olive oil tastes like here in the United States. We don't have olive trees in our backyard. We're not making our own olive oil. So the same kind of thing is happening with the fish oil industry. We're seeing that fish oil is very valuable, so they're trying to find the biggest fish they can to harvest that oil from. Now, the biggest fish you can get in the sea that has a good amount of fish oil in it is tuna. And I'm not talking about the little skipjack tunas that you find. I'm talking about the really big, huge tunas. And the problem with the tuna oil is that tuna are a mercury concentrator. So Tuna eat large fish. Those large fish will eat medium-sized fish. The medium-sized fish will eat small fish and on down. So each time they eat a fish, they're concentrating that mercury in their tissue, and it's in the oil as well. So companies that don't metal test, don't look for those heavy metals, we don't use them. That, again, if you just start with that one criteria, you're going to knock out a majority of the fish oil that's on the market. The other problem with fish oil is the oxidation. So when you have a fish oil that's been sitting around for a long time, or it's been in storage, or it hasn't been given the proper amount of an antioxidant in there to keep it stable, it will oxidize. And oxidated oil is actually worse for you than if you hadn't taken the fish oil at all. So when you're burping, that's usually a sign that your body's trying to get rid of something. Now, I'm not talking about the one little burp you have after you swallow all your capsules. I'm talking about a repeated burping where you're just tasting the fish for hours and hours. That's a good sign that your oil is a low quality, a poor quality. And you can, I mean, this is what I tell people. Tell your friends this. Ask them, how do you like your fish oil? Oh, it's great. Does it make you burp? All the time. Probably not a good fish oil. Try this one. So the thing that's different about the Omega Max product is the way they've created that oil. Number one, it follows all those same guidelines we talked before. It's not oxidized, so it's very fresh. It has what it says it has in it and nothing else. And actually on that oil, they follow the IFOS 5-star guidelines, and the 5-star guidelines, where the FDA says you can be 90% of your label claim, the IFOS guidelines say you have to actually be 100% or more to get the 5-star rating. So to get the 5-star rating, most companies who are doing IFOS, they undersell their label claim. So they'll say it contains 970 milligrams of omega-3, even though their testing may show that it's 1,100, and so that's so they can retain that 5-star rating. All the fish oil that I use is IFOS 5-star rated. It's got the purity, it's not oxidized, but what's really unique about this particular one is it's the most bioavailable omega-3 fatty acid that we've used. I'm hoping in probably within the next 6 months we'll have a way that you guys can test your own omega-3 levels. Because I'm finding out a lot of the people coming in saying the doctor won't run the test or doesn't know where to get the test, so we're hoping to make that available where you, through your Bonvera program, be able to purchase your own lab tests and be able to check to see what is your omega-3 doing. The reason that's so important is that a lot of people, people say, well, how much omega-3 do I need? Well, it depends. Right? How high are your triglycerides? Do you have insulin resistance? Do you have inflammation? Do you have joint pain? How much omega-3 are you getting in your diet? Are you eating a lot of grass-fed beef? Are you eating a lot of fish? Then you may need less supplementation because your lifestyle has a lot of omega-3s built into it. If you're not doing any of those things, you might need more omega-3 supplementation. I have a particular genetic variation called LP(a), and LP(a) puts this nasty little corkscrew on all my LDL molecules. It's called the Widowmaker molecule, and it's one of the tests that we run in our office. And so for me, I have to take about 4 to 6 grams of fish oil a day. So I'm taking 3 in the morning, 3 in the evening of the highest bioavailable fish oil I can find, because I know that it'll decrease my risk from that little genetic variation that I have. But the best way to know is to measure your omega-3 levels, make sure you're around 5% or higher. 8% would be ideal. So we'll very soon hopefully have a way that you guys can be able to do that, to know that the product is working well for you. If you guys are in St. Louis, I showed pictures of colonoscopies. Do you guys remember that one? Oh, yeah. It's sad when that's like the big hit of the show and people talk about that. But if you weren't there, what it was is that a lot of people are taking tablets, and to do that process, you wouldn't see the encapsulator like they had at our manufacturer. You would see a machine that adds a glue or a binder and then presses it under very, very high compression and then actually coats it in shellac. Now, as far as I know, there's no human need for shellac in your diet, okay? So I avoid things that have shellac on them. But what's really funny about these is they do the shellac because it's easier to swallow, because a tablet, if it's dry, it kind of sticks as it's going down. I've found them in the colon, undigested. So pretty much by the time something gets to your colon, it's on its way out. If you haven't absorbed it by then, you're not going to. So the picture in St. Louis was of these tablets. And in some cases, I've even got some pictures I can read the imprint. It says 1 a day on it. Yeah. Even grocery store. Can I tell you guys haven't eaten anything recently, have you? Okay. So the grocery store was a patient of mine with a septic tank system. I think I shared this in St. Louis. And the guy was getting his septic tank serviced, and the serviceman came away and he said, "You guys sure take a lot of vitamins in your family." And the guy looked at him and goes, "Huh? What? Why are you saying that? He goes, oh, come over here. So he took his flashlight out, he shined it in the septic tank, and he said there were just vitamins floating on the top of the septic tank. So they were literally flushing those things down the toilet. So the vegetable capsule that we use for our micronutrients and the magnesium and the multivitamin is a second generation. It dissolves very quickly. Even if you have your hands wet when you take those, you'll notice that they'll start to dissolve in your hand. So you gotta be pretty quick about getting them down. That's another thing that comes with the USP guidelines is they have to have a certain dissolution time. They have to break apart quickly. I want to talk just for a couple minutes about what we're going to be talking about. How many of you are going to be going to a Kansas City event? Really, everybody here should, yeah? Okay, a few people aren't going to make it, so it's my job to try to convince them that will be a good experience to go see. It really is a lot of fun. If you haven't been to one, we're going to be talking in depth about the Just For Her product, okay? This is a product that I'm really excited about. And I know the men in this room are probably thinking, oh, Just For Her. Yeah, where's my product? Well, we're working on it, okay? We're working on it just for him. But believe me, the Just For Her product is for you guys too, okay? Because happy wife, happy life, right? If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, that kind of thing. So the Just For Her product, it's one that clinically, I don't know that we would be able to do what we do in our practice without that product. We help a lot of people who have dysmenorrhea, who have dysfunctional uterine bleeding, difficulty getting pregnant. They're going through a rough time transitioning through menopause. Even younger patients who have premenstrual tension syndrome or PMS. That one is the words of my patients that I hear over and over again is they say, it's a game changer. I don't have people coming in and telling me that their fish oil is a game changer for them, even though I know that it is, right? Because I see their triglycerides go down, I see their inflammatory markers go down, but they don't come in very often and say it's a game changer. And this one they really do. They say that very often, it's a game changer. So we'll be launching that product. And the other one that I'm really, really excited about, I know Jann's thrilled about this one, is a children's multivitamin. This one, you cannot imagine how difficult it's been to find a children's multivitamin that's not a gummy, filled with sugar, with artificial colors and flavors, and with a bunch of micronutrients that the body doesn't use. Just about every single one on the market has all of that junk in it. So this particular children's multivitamin actually tastes good, it's chewable, and it has the exact same micronutrients that's in your multivitamin. Very, very excited about that. And then the third thing that we're going to be announcing, we're going to bring the first 2 weeks of our lifestyle program, which is, we call it the Metabolic Cleanse. We're going to bring the first 2 weeks of that as a product that you'll be able to get through Bonvera. That one's amazing, yeah. So I'll be talking in more detail about that, but that gives a book that kind of talks about our nutritional and metabolic cleanse process that we do. It's the first 2 weeks of our lifestyle program. There is some product in there that helps with liver, phase 1 and phase 2, metabolization in the liver. There's some digestive enzymes in there, and it's a really nice protein powder. So we'll be talking in more detail about that. So
one thing I might tell people is that if they go on Facebook and go to the PhyzixMD Facebook page, they'll see your videos, and they can all use them because it's fabulous. Actually, a bunch of people turned in questions. Okay, the first one is, can the Just For Her be taken with birth control?
Yeah. In fact, anybody who's on hormone replacement, that's one way we use that product. The Just For Her has a lot of micronutrients that specifically help the liver metabolize estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And when we make these hormones in our body, when women make them in their body, they have to metabolize them. So if you look at the estrogen pathway, it can't just stay estrogen forever. It stays estrogen and then needs to go down to the next step. And sometimes your estrogen will go down a very inflammatory pathway. And we think that may increase risk for breast cancer and some of the negative effects we're seeing with estrogens. But we absolutely, for any of the women in our practice who are on hormone therapy, whether it's bioidentical or they're taking birth control, yes, we would have them on that. Now, I do tell them that if they get pregnant, I usually pull them off of everything. I mean, other than their prenatal vitamins and their fish oil. We don't use that product while they're pregnant, but they can take it when they're breastfeeding. So,
do we need a probiotic with using Common Clear?
So probiotics are really interesting. How many of you guys use probiotics now? I think probiotics are fascinating. So 30 years ago, if someone came to you and said, hey, I've got this capsule, it's chock full of bacteria, I want you to take it every day, what would you have said, right? You're like, are you crazy? Why remember the first person that came to my practice and said they were taking probiotics. I was like, what's a probiotic? They said, oh, it's beneficial bacteria. I go, no, bacteria are bad, right? We're trying to kill it. We got the germicide going. So probiotics, I don't use them in everyone, but if you have gut dysfunction, right? If you have constipation, if you've got pain after you eat a meal, a probiotic could really help. We don't completely understand how probiotics work. We know that they need to be alive, and so that's one of the biggest challenges, getting something that's shelf stable. We know that they need to be of a certain strain. Certain bacteria work well and certain don't. And then the other thing I would say is if you take a probiotic and it makes you feel worse, that could be a sign of SIBO. Has anybody heard of SIBO before? Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? How about irritable bowel syndrome? Raise your hand if you know anybody with irritable bowel syndrome. Okay. You know somebody with SIBO. That's what SIBO is IBS. I like probiotics a lot. I actually like eating fermented food. So fermented food is things like cultured yogurt, kefir, kombucha. Anybody ever tried to make their own kombucha before? Your neighbors come over and think you're kind of weird. Looks like you have a science experiment in your pantry. You're trying to give your SCOBY out, the mother, to everybody, and they're like, no, I don't. I got enough snot. I don't need any more. Yeah. That's a good question.
Next question.
Yeah.
What to take for type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and can't sleep?
Okay, so what to take for diabetes. When I talked in St. Louis, I said it's always easier to take away before you add. So with diabetes, the first thing you take away is carbohydrates. If someone's diabetes is out of control, you got to look at your diet. You got to think about what you're eating. And in our Facebook page, I found a book. It was an old book, medical book, and it was from a time before we had insulin. So think about this. There was a time when we couldn't use insulin in people. And in that book, it told them the foods they could eat. So it was butter, eggs, bacon, meat, chicken, and then the foods that they shouldn't eat. Bread, rice, potatoes. Now, the American Diabetes Association no longer says that, right? They say, oh, you can have carbohydrates, just don't have too many, and make sure you take your insulin so that your sugars don't rise too high. So the first thing with diabetes is you got to get the diet under control. I think the magnesium can be really helpful for people who have diabetes, especially if they have nerve dysfunction, if they're not sleeping very, very well. The multivitamin has a therapeutic amount of chromium and vanadium in it. So chromium helps with insulin resistance. That's what diabetes type 2 is. It's a problem of insulin resistance, or diabesity is what I like to call it. So that's actually a fantastic multivitamin for anybody who has diabetes. It will help with insulin resistance as long as they're not, really challenging themselves with too many carbohydrates.
Is Common Clear okay for pregnant women?
Yes.
Would Common Clear help constipation?
Yes, if you take enough of it.
Not the whole thing, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
How young can someone give Common Clear?
Yeah, that's a good question. We haven't studied it down in that age group. I would say when kids are eating table food and drinking and eating what most of the people at the table are, then that would be the age that I think would be okay for them to use. I'd probably just use a really small amount. They may not tell you that they're having diarrhea, so you might have to watch for that. Certainly is not harmful to use in kids.
I have a lot of questions here that have to do with ADD, ADHD, and autism. And I know, if I recall, that's a passion of your wife's also.
Yes, and both Dr. Marvin and myself have finished fellowship in the Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs, which is addressing the problem of autism. So it is a very special interest of not only our family, but also in my practice.
Would the Common Clear help these kids?
Yes, Common Clear would be fantastic for anybody who has attention deficit in the adult, in the child. Getting them to help with sleep will also help them. The thing with the attention deficit, there's so many kids that are diagnosed with that, right? I mean, where did that come from? And I think it's a multifactorial problem. I don't think just one thing, but we're making kids sit in chairs all day long. We took recess away from them. I think I had 3 recesses when I was growing up, right? And nap time. Who remembers nap time? Man, nap time was the best. You had a little carpet that you go curl up on. Teacher would play some calm music. So, a lot of things have changed where we're trying to get kids to sit in lecture situations, and they really shouldn't be. Kids should be outside moving and doing. Their diet is poor. Yes, thank you. I agree. Kids' diet's very poor. I mean, look at school lunch programs here in the United States, and they're atrocious. We're filling them up with artificial colors and flavors. A lot of those can be neuroinflammatory. Again, they're not getting therapeutic amounts of a lot of these micronutrients. So that's what's fun about these products we started with. They're really a foundational products for almost anybody.
On the new kids vitamin that's coming down, what age would that be for?
If they can chew, they can take it.
Okay, that's great. Here's one on, I have severe GERD or heartburn. I have had for over 20 years. I've taken everything from Prozac, Prevacid, Nexium, Zantac a couple times a day. Do you have any recommendation?
Yeah, so I would say heartburn is one of those things that when we first found that excess acid was causing heartburn and it was causing a lot of gastric ulcers, we came up with proton pump inhibitors, and that's what she was listing off. And what those do, those medications bind to a particular cell in the gut, and they keep it from producing stomach acid. So heartburn, if you look at the stomach, so you've got the esophagus, and this is this is not an anatomical diagram, right? This is the diagram they show in the commercials, with the guy standing sideways with his mouth and the tube that goes down. It's not quite this pretty, but so this is the stomach, and then goes down to the small bowel, and this is your pylorus here. So when you eat a meal, you have two parts of the diaphragm that come here. So these are large muscles at the base of the lungs, and their function is twofold. Number one is when they contract, they flatten out, and it acts to pull air into the chest cavity. So that's one way we breathe, is with our diaphragm. The other thing that the diaphragm does is it forms a little valve here, and that actually helps close the esophagus. The esophagus isn't a true valve like what we have in our heart. It's a valve that's made up with muscles that are pinching in. So there's a lot of things that can be going on if you have heartburn, and one of the problems is that you could have a hiatal hernia. So this muscle may not go all the way over, and instead of your stomach staying down here, your stomach actually comes up above the diaphragm, okay? And the problem is that these cells here produce acid, and now even if your diaphragm is closing down at a lower level, you've got part of your stomach that's coming up and herniating into the chest cavity, and now that acid is just constantly being produced and irritating the esophagus. So that's one particular issue that can have with people. So I would encourage that person to go see a doctor and maybe have a scope done to see if they have that problem. The other problem that happens with people who have heartburn is they don't make enough stomach acid. Okay, and that sounds crazy, right? But bear with me. If you eat a meal, there's a signal that says start making acid. It's hydrochloric acid that we make. So it's these hydrogen ions and chloride ions, HCl. And if you can make a really strong acid, you can digest your food very quickly, all right? And when you digest your food very quickly, the food ends up going down out of the stomach and into the small bowel. So that's called gastric transit time. So one of the problems when you put someone on a proton pump inhibitor, you don't inhibit all of the acid production, but you inhibit enough of it that now instead of them making a small amount of acid, that fills up the bottom of the stomach and they can digest and break things down, since it's a weak acid, your stomach keeps churning it out until the job is done. Until the stomach's empty, it's going to keep secreting acid. So what happens in these situations is you've got a weak acid that's being produced and you're making a lot of it. Well, which one is more likely as you're walking around through your day to splash up and cause heartburn? The weak acid. So one of the tricks that we tell people to do is to actually take a product that you can get. It's called betaine hydrochloride, and you can actually take a hydrochloric acid tablet with a meal. And if you take one with a meal and you don't have any pain, then the next time you eat a meal, you take 2 tablets, and then you take 3, and you do it until you have a stomach ache, basically, and then you back off. It's kind of the same thing we do with the magnesium and diarrhea, the loose stools. So that's another problem. I think a lot of people that have heartburn, it's actually that they're not making enough stomach acid. And one of the problems with being on proton and pump inhibitors for years and years and years is that you decrease the amount of magnesium that you're able to digest and assimilate. You decrease the amount of food that you can break down. So you're actually not absorbing those micronutrients when you've been on proton and pump inhibitors for a long time. The third thing that can happen with people who have heartburn is that SIBO that I talked about, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So if you have bacteria in the small bowel, okay, so the small bowel is very long, but it's a smaller structure. If you have bacteria in here that are producing gas, that gas can bubble up and it can actually cause heartburn. So that's another thing that we rule out in our clinic to make sure that people don't have these problems. But heartburn's more complicated than it seems, and so for that person, I would encourage them just to get to somebody who has a functional understanding of heartburn and can do some of these advanced tests and kind of think through that problem.
Good. We got one other question. It talks about someone that has severe arthritis, and they've been on Valium and a lot of other medication, steroids for over 10 years, and they started taking the Calm and Clear so that they could help them rest. Could they, and that gave them severe diarrhea, could they back that off to a half and then keep increasing it, or what would you recommend for someone?
So again, I would say for them, they may have just a lot of other sources of magnesium in their diet that they're getting naturally. They may be eating a lot of nuts and seeds and things like that. So if they want to just reduce the dose so that they're not having loose stools, that'd be the best thing to do. For the arthritis, though, again, I'd go for the anti-inflammatory effect and the Omega Max, right? It's a very, very powerful anti-inflammatory. In fact, for my mother-in-law, we got her off of all of her pain medication by just increasing her fish oil, and her triglycerides went down, her brain works better. There's a bunch of other good side effects when you're using that. So she was able to get off of her Tylenol, and she was also on Vioxx. They took Vioxx off the market because it was killing people. Really good anti-inflammatory, but it killed people. So, like I said, sometimes we hurt people. It wasn't that I was meaning to, it's just, it happens.
Well, I think that went through the questions. Boy, I tell you what, have we been blessed by Dr. Davis coming here? Wow.
Thank you guys very much for having me. All right.
I have to tell you that we have a great partnership here, and this is just the beginning. I think I told you earlier that we could do a whole business just off of Dr. Davis's products, and it's only going to get bigger and better. We're going to kick off with the Moments Matter Foundation here in September with the children's vitamins, which is going to be, a huge thing of giving back to many, many kids who are underprivileged. So we thank you so much for coming and sharing with us and answering the questions.
We hope you've enjoyed this content. Take the next step and attend a live EXO event. While these techniques and approaches have worked for others, no one can guarantee they will work for you. We hope, however, they will assist you in building a strong and profitable business. This is a copyrighted program. The purchase of these materials is optional and subject to the refund policy on the exotrainingsystem.com website.